Hello, my name is Sierra Jones, and we are going to look at the ethnographic research or that theory. When we think about ethnographic research, if you've ever wondered how do you study cultures and communities from an insider's perspective, this is the approach that would be best. So, we are going to break down what ethnography is, as well as how it's used, the methods behind it, its advantages and disadvantages, as well as how it can be applied to my research. Let's get started. So, first, what is an ethnographic research study? It's a qualitative method used to study cultural sharing groups by examining their behaviors, beliefs, and languages over time. Oftentimes, researchers immerse themselves in the community to observe and interpret how people interact within their cultural context. Some key things about it is that the study is a real world social interaction. Focuses on shared cultural behaviors and beliefs. It's a long-term engagement in field work. For example, an ethnographic study could be first generation college students might explore how they navigate academic spaces and build support networks. The second thing is, when should an ethnographic research study be used? So it's best to be used when you want to understand group behaviors in depth. Also, if the social context and environments are crucial to that study, as well as long term observations and interactions that are possible. So, if you're looking at the study of how teachers implement culturally responsive teaching, ethnographs allow researchers to really observe that classroom over time rather than relying on short interviews or surveys. Number three, what type of methodologies can be used in an ethnographic research study? Um, the methodologies that could be used is choosing a cultural shared group to study, maybe gaining trust. So looking at that ethical approval and permission from those participants. Um, Observe daily interactions, rituals, and communication styles. You could also collect data through multiple sources like interviews, observations, and artifacts. Um, Identify themes and behaviors, beliefs, and languages as stated earlier. As a Black woman who is in STEM education, I could involve following a group of people's academic journey, interviewing them, and observing their challenges and successes in those fields. What coding is used in an ethnographic research study? We've talked about a lot of codings throughout understanding the different types of methodologies. So when we look at the coding, would maybe open coding, which is identifying broader themes from observations and interviews. You can use an axle coding, connecting themes to understand relationships, or even a selective coding where you're focusing on core cultural patterns that define the actual group. So whether you're trying to have teachers build rapport with students, uh, any type of these codings might help to show a theme like trust building behaviors or communication styles and classroom culture. Number five, what are the advantages of using ethnographic studies? We'll talk about advantages and disadvantages in number six. Why should we actually choose ethnograph? It just provides a deep cultural insight. So, real life social interactions. The data collection can evolve based on observation. It includes participants' stories, their emotions, and lived experiences. Um, it also can just go cross applicable to all different types of fields of study. Some disadvantages, we also know that not all methodologies are perfect and they're always going to have their challenges. It is time consuming because it does require a long term engagement. Um, the presence of the researcher may affect participants' behavior. You could also look at the data interpretation. It could be influenced by whatever the researcher's perspective is, as well as just findings applied to specific groups and they're, again, not the broader population. It can go into kind of stereotypes as well. So, like a study on cultural identities in urban schools may not fully apply to students in rural areas. So, just understanding that this group, having a group and looking at those studies is a disadvantage at some point because you're not really getting the larger understanding or population. You're really focusing on one group of study. Number seven, what populations, individuals, or groups could be used in this ethnographic research study? It could be individuals, from students to teachers, families. Small groups, classrooms, school staff, teams, or community organizations. It could be larger communities such as our universities, educational institutes, and workplaces. So, if I had to describe different research studies that I could write based on the ethnographic, um, I may look at just like culturally responsive teaching, of course, and maybe go into a geometry classroom and just see like what those classroom observations, what the student to teacher interaction is. Maybe if that teacher is using real world experiences from students' cultures to implement the math instruction and making it where it's like a framework of how you can bring those real world learning experiences for geometry into the math instruction so that students are able to see themselves, see other careers and opportunities in that learning space. Also, just looking at equity and professional development for teachers, identifying some of those barriers and best practices for teacher growth when it comes to professional development, such as what have been their background experiences with professional development. I know in the teaching world, professional development is not always the best use of time for teachers for some people, unless it's something that they can find it immediately accessible and applicable to their teaching in their classroom. So what are those background experiences of why teachers may or may not enjoy going to professional development spaces? But overall, research, this like ethnographic research helps me to understand cultural groups by observing and analyzing real life social interactions. As I read through some of the articles that were provided, it just allows me to deeply understand meaningful insight and how I could go about getting human behaviors in if I wanted to do this type of research method. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.